Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News on tonight's headlines. New details are emerging from Vancouver following that tragic event at the Filipino Festival. Now, authorities have now identified and charged a 30-year-old local student. His name is Kaiji Adam Low with murder.
11 people have now died. Their ages range from 5 to 65. I'm able to say that the person we have in custody does have a significant history of interactions with police related to mental health.
And the news starts now. New details are emerging from Vancouver following that tragic event at the Filipino Festival. Now, authorities have now identified and charged a 30-year-old local student. His name is Kaiji Adam Low with murder. And this comes after at least 11 people lost their lives and many more were injured in that shocking SUV ramming on Saturday. Now, police indicate this may just be the beginning of the charges.
Interim Police Chief Steve Rai rules out terrorism because there is no evidence of any political or ideological factors behind the attack. He says the trouble began shortly after 8 o'clock Saturday night at a Lapu-Lapu Day block party celebrating a Philippine national hero.
Although it was scheduled to wrap up at 8 p.m., there were still many people in the area when the incident occurred. The vehicle that struck festival goers approached the festival area from the west on East 43rd Avenue. It entered a small crowd enclosed area and drove through the crowd. There were hundreds of festival goers still on the street, and multiple people were struck by the vehicle. There are now 11 confirmed fatalities.
Rai fears the death toll could go higher because several of the injured are in critical condition. He says the victims span a range of ages but offered no other details. Paramedics took the injured to 9 different hospitals in Vancouver. The attack took place on a side street where food trucks had been parked adjacent to a school ground where the celebration took place. Witness Joshua Palantan saw the tragedy unfold.
Right there, some car, some Audi, black Audi, he just stopped or whatever. I don't know, but from over there, from the start right there, he just pushed the gas all the way through the whole block right there, crashing into everyone in his way.
The suspect tried to escape, but event goers chased him down. They held them against a fence until police arrived about 10 minutes later. As far as the suspect, Rai provided few details.
The person we have in custody does have a significant history of interactions with police and healthcare professionals related to mental health.
Number 1, the suspect has been arrested and is currently in VPD custody. Secondly, evidence points to this not being an act of terrorism. Thirdly, the individual in question has a significant history of mental health issues. And fourthly, he is known to police for a multitude of mental health interactions. Now, it would appear that mental health appears to be the underlying issue here.
Rai says police have been in contact with the suspect's family. He says more than 100 Vancouver police officers are working on the investigation. Asked why the street where the tragedy occurred had not been blocked off, Rai says at the time they considered it low risk.
I know there are questions about whether this tragedy could have been prevented. The Vancouver Police Department worked with the City of Vancouver to conduct a risk assessment prior to the Lapu-Lapu Festival. The majority of activities associated with the festival were taking place on the grounds of a high school. which is not directly accessible via public roadway. The only public roadway that required partial closure was on a minor street behind the high school. And this area was designated for food trucks. And there were no known threats to the event or to the Filipino community.
A 24-hour assistance center had been set up to help people who have been impacted. As the community warns, RIDE describes Saturday as the darkest day in Vancouver history.
Last night, as thousands of members of Vancouver's Filipino community gathered for an important cultural celebration, the actions of a single person shattered our collective sense of safety. It is impossible to overstate how many lives have been impacted forever by this lone individual.
Just a few blocks from here, I was here with my daughter on stage with Maple and the organizers, celebrating a community in this province that does nothing but give, has nothing but love. I don't think there's a British Columbian that hasn't been touched in some way by the Filipino community. You can't go to a place that delivers care in our province and not meet a member of that community.
Prime Minister Mark Carney offered his condolences.
Last night, families lost a sister, a brother, a mother, a father, a son, or a daughter. Those families are living every family's nightmare. And to them and to the many others who were injured, to the Filipino-Canadian community, and to everyone in the broader Lower Mainland, Vancouver, I would like to offer my deepest condolences and my wishes for strength and compassion in this tragic time. I know that I join all Canadians in mourning with you. I know that Canadians are united with you.
While the Filipino community comes to grips with this tragedy, the organization putting on the event posted on social media that it is devastated by the families and the victims. It counsels all community members to check in, support, and hold each other. You are not alone, it writes. Jay Suarez, Vancouver, Canada, for NET25 World News.
There's a clear difference in how the Philippines and China are viewing recent events in the West Philippine Sea, after the Philippines assured everyone that Sandy Cay near Pagasa Island remains secure and that reports of a Chinese seizure were false.
We urge the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Coast Guard to act with restraint and not increase tensions in the West Philippine Sea. We remind them of their commitment in the 2002 Declaration of Conduct, which they themselves adhere to, which they themselves continue to refer to in each and every statement issued by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. We also ask them to stop all provocative activities in the West Philippine Sea.
China has now responded. Their foreign ministry claims their Coast Guard's landing on what they call Taixian Reef was a necessary measure to counter the Philippines' illegal landing and other provocations. They emphasize that the reef is uninhabited and that their actions were about asserting their sovereignty.
Taixian Reef or Sandy Cay Reef is part of China's Nansha Islands and is an uninhabited reef. China's rights protection and law enforcement activities there are conducted in accordance with the law, aimed at countering the Philippines' illegal landings and other acts of infringement and provocation, firmly safeguarding national territorial sovereignty, ensuring that Taixian Reef or Sandy Cay Reef remains uninhabited and without facilities, and upholding the seriousness of the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea.
We can already observe how the Chinese government plan out their strategy. It always starts with a lie. And then if you're not going to counter the lie, they're going to operationalize that lie and take possession of whatever narrative that they have.
So while Manila says no takeover occurred, Beijing is justifying their actions as a response to alleged Philippine moves. Who are we to believe? Tonight, we also bring you breaking news out of Clearwater, Florida, where a ferry packed with passengers collided with a recreational boat, leaving one person dead and several others injured. Take a look. Emergency crews rushed to the scene near the Memorial Causeway Bridge just after sunset. Authorities say the ferry was carrying more than 40 people when the crash happened, and the situation quickly escalated into what officials called a mass casualty event. Witnesses described the chaotic scene as police, fire, and rescue teams raced to evacuate everyone from the ferry, which ended up stranded on a sandbar. 6 people were seriously hurt. 2 of them had to be airlifted to local hospitals. Here's what's especially troubling. The boat that struck the ferry didn't stick around. It sped away from the scene, but law enforcement says they've since identified that vessel and are working to track down those involved. The U.S. Coast Guard and Florida Fish and Wildlife are leading the investigation tonight, and they're still piecing together exactly what caused the crash, and at this point, there are no reports of anyone missing from the ferry. All of this happened as the area was wrapping up the popular Sugar Sand Festival, so there was even more traffic on the water than usual. Authorities are asking folks to steer clear of the Memorial Causeway Bridge area while they continue their work. Now let's talk about the numbers coming out of Canada. We're seeing a 25% jump in early voter turnout, meaning millions of Canadians have already cast their ballots. What does this mean for the election, and who are the key candidates to watch? Yolanda Aspiras reports from Toronto.
Canada will be electing its next Prime Minister. Days leading to Election Day, a record-breaking number of Canadians came out to cast their votes during the advance voting period. Compared to the 2021 federal election, this year shows a 25% increase of Canadians coming out to vote. Election Canada has reported that 7.3 million people cast their ballots from April 18 to 21. The first day of advance polls showed 2 million votes cast. As of this week, prediction polls show Liberal candidate Mark Carney is leading with 43.1%, only about 5 points ahead Conservative candidate Pierre Poilievre. New Democrat candidate Jagmeet Singh trails far in third with 8.3%. Election Day in Canada is April 28. Canadians are encouraged to come out and register to vote on Elections Canada's website or in person at the polls. Polling stations will be open for 12 hours. Canadians should check and bring their voter information card along with their government ID to prove their identity and address. Yolanda Aspiras, Toronto, Ontario for NET25 World News.
Canadian elections are usually pretty straightforward. Economy, cost of living, you know the drill. But this time around, things are a little different. It's Election Day in Canada, and believe it or not, U.S. President Donald Trump has managed to stir up some serious patriotism up there. Take a look.
Canadian elections lack the drama of some other countries. The campaign period is short, just 4 to 5 weeks, and the issues, well, pretty much bread and butter. The economy, cost of living, that sort of thing. This time round, though, the campaign has drawn out Canadian patriotism, which is generally low-key. And that's thanks to the musings of the leader of the country's southern neighbor, Donald Trump.
So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
This is the sort of talk that has raised the dander of Canadians. Now, Trump toned down his comments on Canada for a few weeks, but in an interview last week with Time magazine, he again suggested Canada would be better off if it became part of the U.S. David Perry of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute says all of this Trump talk has become the focus of much of the election campaign.
President Trump tends to suck up almost all the oxygen here, and I think, unfortunately, the wider set of very broad and extensive and previously very productive, very collegial relationships with the United States and Americans more broadly are getting looked at through the prism of the relationship between Canadian politicians and the American president and his administration narrowly.
In their appeal to voters, Liberal leader Mark Carney and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre are trying to portray themselves as the one who can best defend Canada against Trump's expansionist dreams. So for the past month, this is what Canadians have been hearing. Mark Carney.
President Trump repeated his attacks on Canada. He said he doesn't want Canada, I'm quoting, to play any part in the American auto industry. So I'll be equally clear. This is Canada. We decide what happens here.
Pierre Poilievre.
We need to put Canada first for a change, with a new Conservative government that will axe taxes, unleash our resource production, build pipelines, secure our border, rebuild our armed forces, and stand up to Donald Trump from a position of strength.
Analyst Perry says since the beginning of the year, the political map in Canada has changed, and that has come to the forefront in this election campaign.
I think about half the electorate, based on the public polling, is looking to elect a prime minister that would be able to take on and be forceful with President Trump and to chart a new relationship with the United States. There's about another half of the electorate that is concerned with the same kind of issues that had the Conservative Party up until the beginning of January, 20 points up in the polls, which is a concern about cost of living issues and the state of the economy, particularly for people under about the age of 40, for whom life is increasingly unaffordable.
Nevertheless, Trump is a major campaign issue. The polls indicate this will be a close race. Carney's Liberals have about a 4% lead over Poilievre's Conservatives. And while Carney is poised to win, the question is, will he have a majority government or a minority? There are a few other smaller parties fielding candidates in the election. They have nowhere near the support needed to form government, but they could be key players in propping up the governing party if Canadians elect a minority government. We'll have those details for you this time tomorrow. Thomas I. Likeness, NET25 World News.
To Asia now, where Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba made his first official visit to Vietnam today, meeting with Prime Minister Chin in Hanoi. The two leaders agreed to step up trade between their countries and committed to keeping global trade open and fair, especially as the threat of steep U.S. tariffs looms over both economies. Ishiba's trip comes at a tense moment. Earlier this month, the U.S. announced hefty tariffs, 46% on Vietnamese goods and 24% on Japanese exports. While those tariffs are on hold until July, as talks continue, a 10% duty is still being charged on everything both countries send to the U.S., which is a crucial market for them. Both Japan and Vietnam are now in discussions with Washington, hoping to avoid those tariffs altogether. Vietnam's top leader To Lam also met with Prime Minister Ishiba and urged Japan to invest even more in Vietnam's infrastructure. That's not surprising given that Japanese companies like Honda, Canon, and Panasonic have already poured $78 billion into Vietnam, making it a major manufacturing hub for Japanese firms. After wrapping up his visit in Hanoi, Ishiba heads to the Philippines as East Asian leaders scramble to strengthen ties and navigate an unpredictable global trade environment. And now to the war in Ukraine. Here's a key update. North Korea has officially stated that they sent troops to fight alongside Russia. And this decision came straight from Kim Jong-un. And Pyongyang is claiming their forces helped Russia regain control of the Kursk region. Russia has also acknowledged this deployment, with Putin expressing his gratitude. This move, which follows reports of substantial North Korea military aid to Russia, is a significant development, though Ukraine is disputing Russia's claims of fully expelling their forces from the Kursk area. The news that North Korea has deployed troops to fight for Ukraine or to fight for Russia in Ukraine is significant on its own, but some experts are going even further, suggesting Pyongyang's support is fundamentally altering the course of the conflict. Hugh Griffiths, who previously coordinated the UN panel monitoring sanctions on North Korea, offers a powerful perspective on just how vital North Korea's contribution has become. Take a look.
It's fair to say that North Korea has stopped Russia from losing this war. North Korea's contribution has been strategically vital. North Korea's artillery shells are a strategic imperative. Without North Korean support, Vladimir Putin would fail in his war in Ukraine. But the vehicles on the trains are definitely Koksan artillery pieces, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Russia operates according to this military doctrine where artillery fires are central, where you need to bring overwhelming volume and force to bear. We saw it in Chechnya, we've seen it in Syria, and Russia simply doesn't have the industrial capacity to produce the shells it needs. It relies on North Korea.
Now, President Donald Trump has called on Russia to halt its attacks in Ukraine, while his administration warned they might pull out of peace talks if there's no progress. Trump made these comments to reporters in New Jersey, stating he was disappointed by Russia's continued aggression. He also shared that his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Rome on Saturday went well. Let's listen in.
I think the meeting went well. We'll see what happens over the next few days. We'll probably learn a lot. I was very disappointed that missiles were flying by Russia, but that missiles were flying. Very disappointing. We'll see how it goes. You know, look, he wants to do something good for his country. He thinks he's doing a good job, and he's working hard. We'll see what happens. It's a very complicated deal. He told me that he needs more weapons, but he's been saying that for 3 years, you know. He needs more weapons, and we're going to see what happens. I want to see what happens with respect to Russia. Because Russia had been surprised and disappointed, very disappointed that they did the bombing of those places after discussions. I see the satellite pictures. They're horrible. They're horrible. I would say it can't get any worse. Body parts laying all over. I don't even like looking at them. Body parts laying all over the fields. What are they doing? It would have never started if I were president.
Turning our attention now to the ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan. Following the deadly attack on tourists in Kashmir last week, China's foreign ministry has weighed in, expressing hope that both sides will show restraint.
China welcomes all measures conducive to cooling down the current situation and supports an impartial investigation as soon as possible. As a common neighbor of both India and Pakistan, China hopes that India and Pakistan will exercise restraint and meet each other halfway. We should properly handle relevant differences through dialogue and consultation, and jointly safeguard regional peace and stability.
However, on the ground, the situation appears to remain tense. India says it's been responding to what it calls unprovoked firing from Pakistan along their de facto border for the fourth night in a row, as they continue to search for the militants believed to be behind the attack. The Indian Navy is making a clear statement just days after that deadly attack on tourists in Kashmir, which India blames on Pakistan. They released a video showcasing their military might. This footage posted on X shows anti-ship missiles being tested. It's hard not to see this as a show of force, especially considering the other steps India has taken, like suspending that key water-sharing treaty and closing their only land border crossing with Pakistan. And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. Now let's talk about where the world's money is going. A new report says global military spending hit a record high of $2.72 trillion last year. And that's a nearly 10% jump from the year before, the biggest increase since the Cold War. Now, what's driving this? Well, tensions are up everywhere, especially in Europe and Middle East. Over 100 countries actually boosted their military budgets. The war in Ukraine is a big factor. Military spending in Europe soared, and Russia alone spent almost 40% more on its military. Ukraine is also spending big. Basically, all its tax money is going to defense. And the U.S., still the top spender, with almost $1 trillion going to the military. Experts warning that all this military spending could have some serious consequences for other important areas like education and healthcare. There's a lot of confusion in the air about whether the U.S. and China are actually making progress on trade. President Trump claimed he has been in touch with China's President Xi Jinping multiple times, but Beijing says nope, no recent talks. Even the U.S. Treasury Secretary seemed in the dark about any direct leader-to-leader conversations. Take a look.
Is the US talking to China about a deal on trade or not? Last week, Donald Trump suggested that he had been in touch with Chinese leader Xi Jinping.
I spoke to him numerous times.
However, he didn't say when the contact had happened or what they had discussed. And Beijing has denied that any talks took place.
As far as I know, there has been no recent phone call between the heads of state of the two countries. I would like to reiterate that China and the United States have not held any consultations or negotiations on the issue of tariffs.
Over the weekend, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was then asked whether talks were underway. In an interview on ABC, he said, "I don't know if President Trump has spoken with President Xi. I know they have a very good relationship and a lot of respect for each other." Bessent said his contact with Chinese counterparts had been on issues besides trade. When asked why Beijing would deny that talks had taken place, he said that policymakers there were playing to a different audience. Trump has imposed tariffs on trading partners around the world and 145% levies on Chinese goods. Beijing has responded with 125% duties on imports from the US. The tensions have roiled financial markets and raised fears of a global economic slowdown, though none of that appeared to rattle Trump last week.
We'll just set the tariff and we'll be reasonable, very reasonable, and that'll be the end. That's the deal.
In an interview Sunday, US Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said that the US was holding daily conversations with China over tariffs, but didn't elaborate further.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.